Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 155. My guest in this episode is Dr. Baron Short, and currently Dr. Baron Short has dual appointments with the Medical University of South Carolina, one appointment being in the Department of Internal Medicine and the other in the Institute of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. His clinical and research interests includes mental illness, comorbid mood disorders, and brain stimulation technologies. And he started a program for Masters of Science in Clinical Research with the intent of pursuing clinical translational work of novel brain stimulation techniques for the treatment of depression and depressive symptomatology found in oncological, rheumatological, and cardiovascular diseases. And in this episode, we discuss a product that he developed and co-founded with Dr. Bashar Badran, and that product is called Zendo, and it is a different type of brain stimulation than the products that he works with or the technology that he works with in clinical environments. This is a publicly available product, and we discuss that, and we find out from him what the product does. And in talking to him, I had gotten a product from him to demonstrate and test and so forth. And I say demonstrate because I made some short videos of the product, etc. And I found the product to be useful in my meditation practice, and my wife tried it too, and we talk about that as well in the conversation. And I hope this doesn't sound cheesy, but Dr. Baron Short was very generous in offering a discount for the product. In that information will be in the description field, and I would not have him on as a guest or endorse this product if I didn't feel it was a good product and something that I would recommend to somebody that I like or trust. So anyway, hopefully you can take me for my word on that. But it was a great conversation. I'm very grateful to him for being here. Also grateful to him to offer his product at a discount to the people who watch this video. So thanks to him for that. Anyway, on with the conversation. I am also grateful to you all for being here and joining us as an observer or listener to this conversation. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome Dr. Baron Short to the IdeaCast interview series. This will be a little bit different than some other interviews that I've done because I will disclose up front that we will be talking about a wearable device in this interview, and I was granted access to one of those devices, and I used it, and we're going to talk about that. But this in no way is an infomercial. I found Dr. Short from Greg Enrique's UTalk channel, and there is a excellent 12-part series with Baron and Greg talking and in dialogue with each other. Links below for that. I would encourage you to watch that, especially if you end up being curious about the product that we're going to talk about. But it's going to be much more than talking about a product. So just wanted to disclaim that to the audience before we get going. Also, there will be links for Baron's respective socials or websites or anything that would be relevant to this conversation. So, Baron, welcome after my long disclaiming there.
Thank you, Justin. Happy to be here, and happy to get on and talk about something near and dear of the Zendo product that we eventually came up with. Maybe before talking about Zendo itself, just a little background about myself. So,
yes.
Again, my name's Baron Short. I'm a physician trained in internal medicine and psychiatry. I have a master's of science in clinical research. I think that sounds kind of intellectual. I think one thing I would want to say is, like, as a young person, about 18, I had an existential crisis and was like, what's the meaning of life? And kind of went searching around the planet and inner and outer worlds. And while I didn't have an answer at that time, I saw that there was a big need to help people. And so even if I didn't have all the answers or knew what the ultimate reality of existence was, I knew that being helpful was important. And so that's kind of what fed kind of my missions in internal medicine, psychiatry. I developed more of an extensive specialization in brain stimulation, and I am the medical director of the brain stimulation service at an academic university. where we use a variety of electricity and magnetism and ultrasound. We stimulate, use devices like transcranial magnetic stimulation, electroconvulsive therapy, more modern forms of this, vagus nerve stimulation on the ear and the neck, ultrasound on the brain. So the idea that circuits of the brain can be modified to help improve and treat various neurological and brain illnesses. To be very clear, and we can talk about this later, I'm not saying that the mind is the brain, but that you can change the brain, which can treat these diseases. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my day job, and also been an avid meditator for over 30 years, a variety of traditions, found a variety of profound change in my life and how I show up in the world. And so how I got into Zendo, in the lab I was working in, we again use all these different tools and technologies to treat diseases. But one of my colleagues named Bashar, who later becomes the co-founder of this company, was a rising star PhD student. And we were playing around with a type of technology called TDCS, or transcranial direct current stimulation. And we placed this device. It's already being studied for depression, a variety of other things, like using TDCS for this. It's not FDA approved for anything as of to date, but that may change. Mm-hmm. And we had a particular montage that we used. And I put this thing on my head, and within a 20-minute session, I felt I was about in my third hour in a meditation retreat. Mm-hmm. And so that just really blew me away. But I also, as an open heart, but also open critical mind, I'm like, but is this real, or is it just on me, or whatever? So that's where it led us to do some blinded controlled trials, which we can talk about here in a second, some open label trials. We took this to Burning Man. It's pretty cool too. Yeah. So long story short, this was much more of a journey than a destination to make a company. We put it out to the world and said, hey, we would love to get these devices out. Long story short, we needed to make a company and follow a capitalistic framework in order to implement and get this to some type of scale. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so it can talk a little more about that journey. I also have some slides I can go through at some point if you're interested, but open to whatever direction you'd like to go.
Yes, I would definitely like to put the slides up in a little bit, but maybe you and I can back and forth on Zendo. I can share some anecdotes from my end from having, again, gotten access to the device. But what I also might want to share with the audience right now is, you mentioned TMS earlier, and there's a really nice 20-minute long interview with you, I believe in the capacity of the medical center that you work at, or you may have worked. It was only less than a year. Yeah, less than a year ago. So and really fascinating. It addresses TMS and the therapeutic value of TMS somatically or psychosomatically, if that's the right way to say it. So I will include that in the show notes or the description field, because in doing that, I want to impress on the audience that what you're doing is not flimflammery. It is actually, I think this is a graduating step to the TDCS. Not necessarily directly from TMS in a linear fashion, but that this is a sort of graduating process in your facilitating the availability of this kind of technology / interface with our brains, as you said. Not necessarily, mind can be just defined thanks to people like John Vervaeke. I can define many ways, and I'm one of those people. I'm into that 4E cognition, right? It's not just this slab. It's there's so much more involved. But that's a tangent. But yes, I just want to include that in this conversation in an ancillary way. That was a great conversation that you had.
And I think that's a great point before people may or may not perceive some level of woo-woo of using brain stimulation to induce meditative states. That, like, the people who know me day to day know I'm a pretty hard-nosed physician, and we, probably one of the more medical of open-hearted but very medical-based psychiatrist, right? And so
Yeah.
people are coming to me when conventional talk therapy and medications are not working that well to help people recover. And so I would love to double click just as part of the advocacy in general is that this TMS or transcranial magnetic stimulation involves placing a magnet over the head. It produces electromagnetic pulses that go through the skin, muscle, bone, touches the brain, and you can activate or inhibit brain regions depending on the frequency you set the device.
Hmm.
And knowing that depression, just another advocacy plug, like depression is the biggest worldwide cause of disability. We know that 30 to 50% of people don't get better on medications and therapy. And I'm very pro therapy and medications, but just to know half of people just aren't going to get better. And you could give them a technology like TMS and that you 9x their chance of recovery. And so I think in my own field, I would say we have depression all wrong, where we have better tools and technology, but less than 1% of people get access to these technologies. And it's partially based on people don't know, the doctors don't know. 1 out of 4 psychiatrists are trained in some of the things that I do, which means 3 out of 4 aren't. So it's kind of propagates the challenge. And so any chance I get to kind of say, look outside the box of just meds and therapy, if they're not working for somebody or a family member, please look, it's out there and you can get help and get better. So
Yeah.
did want to say that. And that also kind of speaks to what I would talk about with Zendo, is in a sense, a very brain stimulation light technology, right? So, I mean, do procedures involving anesthesia. I have people with electrodes in their brain. We do some deep brain stimulation, epidural cortical stimulation where people have electrodes on the front of their brain. So the idea of taking essentially a headband that has pucks that has a mild bioelectric current is like almost nothing, right? For me, somebody like me, but for
Right.
somebody who's unfamiliar with the technology, it can perhaps sound like kind of a little spooky or scary. And I think that's an important point that I am coming from a different place, but I also can say that, that type of technology now has been around for many years. And in terms of the actual worry of extreme side effects are minimal. At most people can get some skin irritation is the primary thing that could happen. And so in the scheme of things, it's very safe. So I will say that. So
Yeah.
try to make it safe, and also, the science-backed basing to this technology and its use in this case too.
Right, right. And maybe this is a good time to disclaim that there may be 1 or 2 outlier populations that may not want to engage with this. And I'll let you speak to it specifically, but maybe seizure-prone people, people with certain underlying conditions or conditions that we would want to caution. And it's
Sure.
on your website, so people can see that in the FAQs.
Right. So our website, zendomeditation.com, we talk about that. Certainly, we would encourage people not with a history of seizures or epilepsy, although it might be okay. It's just safety first.
Hmm.
Metal in someone's head and metal in particular around those areas. And then the third would be like profound skin irritant, right? So if you had a big burn on your head or you had open wounds and then you put an electrical current on that, it's going to really hurt.
Mm.
So you wouldn't want to do that. That might be intuitive for some people and maybe not for others. But like if you had
Okay.
really bad skin irritation, you probably wouldn't want to apply this technology until your skin is healed over.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So maybe what we could do is I'll share feedback from my use of the device, and then we could go to the slides if you'd like, if that might be a nice structure, and then we'll move out and see where we go from there. But I do want to share because and again to my audience, I've done this is I'm not sure when I'm going to release this, but as of this recording, there's over 152 or 3 conversations and published, and I've never really talked about a device before or a product necessarily. So this is new territory for me. I want to say that, some people might be cynical and say, well, you got a free product and you tested it. But if I had paid for this with my money, I'd be biased in another direction. So, we can't avoid that. We can't, it can't just miraculous. If it had Star Trek, showed up in my hand through a transducer thing, maybe I could be unbiased. But let's get that out of the way. That this was given to me free of charge. But nonetheless, I don't feel obliged to Barron or anyone else to gloss to wax in any particular direction, to gain reciprocity with someone. So just to say that. But in having used it, and just a brief history, I started my first meditation foray was when I was 16, and it's over 40 years ago. But I did it as an alternative to dropping acid and smoking dope. I'm like, oh, let's try this, and it was actually. What was that guy? Robert H. Monroe. I think he did the hemisync thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
It was all that
Yeah.
weird sound that really went right into the deep end of the pool. And it was interesting, especially, as an alternative to some of the really heavy duty stuff. And then I let go of meditation for years and picked it back up in my 30s and put in some hours and found that and purists out there, the real pure meditators will scoff at this, but I use soundscapes. I use drone to help shut the chattery mind down a little bit, to give it something to do that can help me enter into a space that I want to go into. Typically, that would take 45 minutes to an hour, and I meditated heavily for about 10 years. At hour, 45 minutes at the least. That was a light session, and up to 2.5 hours just to try to get into that sweet spot. And I'll put an asterisk on that and hang that for a second, pin it up for a second. And I stopped meditating about a year and a half ago because I was starting to become depersonalized. I was meditating so much that I was numb. I wasn't really reassociating myself in a healthy way. I was kind of just detached. So I've taken some time off from it. I plan to go back in, but I just wanted to give myself some reimmersion into the into the real world. So anywho, that's my background. What I found in using Zendo is that after a year and a half of abstinence from meditating or missing my meditations, that the Zendo device helped me drop in, if you will, and that I'm not dropping in maybe this way some people do, but just getting into that space of narrative cessation, and object or situational fixation peels back very quickly for me. I think they're like 20-minute sessions,
Mm-hmm.
and found that I get into that quiet place that would be like so entry one for me, and then my final entry, and when I would do hour-long to 2.5-hour meditations, is kind of like a no self space where
Mm-hmm.
there is just the tiniest little bit of narrative, and that narrative would acknowledge that selfness was minimal, but if that narrative amped up just the least little bit, I'd be back being me. So there's a real balancing act there to try not be you and be
Mm-hmm.
really glad not to have the executive function. Anyway, I found that the Zendo gets me to like stage one or stage 1.5, two of getting to that place that I used to like to go very quickly. It helps, and in not having meditated for so long, that getting the chatterbox to settle down, was so much easier. I also will have on another YouTube channel that I'll attach as a link here. My wife used the product as well, and she will speak to it herself. I don't want to speak for her. She will share her thoughts and experiences with that as well. So there'll be a link down there below for that. And I guess the only added thing is, in terms of one's focus, one's monitoring one's environment, that the device itself can be a nice tool. This is incidental, but the device itself is a nice tool for you to move beyond the fact that there's a physical entity on your head. Like when I
Mm-hmm.
used to meditate, I'd have my blinders on and I'd have my headphones on, and that's like let go, let go. And
Mm-hmm.
so I find that the Zendo helps remind me of that I let go, because it is a physical presence on your nervous
Mm-hmm.
sensory motor loop. So that was neat too, in an indirect way. So I'll stop there if you want to respond to that, and then we can
I'd love
go.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, kind of double clicking on the experience, I think you're definitely running into a similar genre of type of experiences people will have, right? So people put this device on, and I can go into the slides, but we're going after specific brain regions and cranial
Hmm.
nerves in the skin. People will feel this tingling, warmth, itchy scenario that kind of will last generally about a minute or two. Some people feel it throughout the session. Some people don't, some people barely even feel it. And other people, it's quite a strong sensation. So it speaks to kind of how sensory perception is different. We're wired all a little differently. But nonetheless, then people kind of sit and breathe and be. People may participate either in stuff on our app, other apps, doing nothing. I'm personally, we have an app almost as a secondary feature. Like this device is designed not to use an app really, and that's like a secondary thing. But usually a few minutes in, people notice they're starting to relax a little bit. About like around minute 10, people describe this kind of body drop where the body really relaxes. Some people even feel like the body disappears a little bit, get a little more of a Teflon mind where things are less sticky. They're not so caught in thought or story, to your point.
Right.
And then people can, that might be it, or they may have other things like change in time perception, where their sense of time perception changes, where it can feel very long or very short. 20 minutes, secondarily doesn't have a lot of meaning. I would say 1 out of 7 people, don't really have much effect. And it probably has to do with, do we have a high enough current to stimulate their brain and their nerves? 1 out of 7 have a big wow, like they have their first experience of selflessness or the context of consciousness, not just being the content. And they get a real wow. And it's been pretty cool to see that happen for people. And then most people are in the middle where they're having some degree of change in their body relaxing, a different orientation to their thought. And then I don't know about for you, but some people will describe not only just the experience at that time, but then after. So people can also have this kind of like focus flow effect that can last for 2 or 3 hours. And I tell people if they're using it, more than like one single session, it's not necessarily daily use, but multiple times a week, that it'll start to have a stacking effect where that's not 2 or 3 hours, but it's 4 or 6 hours.
Okay.
And so interesting things like that happen. So, and I can definitely testify to, out of my practice, I've learned more in the past, say 5 or 6 years, than I did in the prior like 25 years with using Zendo. And part of that was just that if you can drop in that much quicker, you're having more experience and moments of like understanding yourself from that place. That's not a thought, that's not a feeling, that's not a perception. But then secondarily, those things arise within you. And so you start to learn how to reorient. And perhaps maybe we double click or not on when you were talking about where you were meditating so much that you were kind of not reintegrating. That's an important point. Yeah, it definitely can happen for people.
Yeah. And to that point, this is also on your website, I believe in the FAQs, is that you have Cheetah House links there, which I think is excellent because meditation isn't for everyone. And if somebody is subclinically flirting with psychosis or something like that, that this could be a triggering event especially if you overdo meditation. And I probably was, because if you're going out 5 days a week, hour and a half or more into whatever, that could be doing things that may not bode well for you reentering waking normal everyday life, or your reentry, just like psychedelics, your reentry has to be thoughtful and ease you back in. So yeah, I did that to myself, but it was worth it because some of the places or no places that I went in that deep, almost psychonaut like approach to meditating, I freaking love it. I would change it. I had bliss outs. I had, complete void, where I black out just completely and then, come back to, it's not sleep, it's just like, you're like, where am I? So
that's right.
I did weird things, but, anyway, when I re-engage, I plan to be a little more disciplined and probably plan to use different approaches. So sorry.
There was a particular, just associative thought of, there's a particular, I won't say who, but a Christian theological church and system that's worldwide, that there for a while they were buying a bunch of Zendos to let their church members go into the void. So they had a very big contemplative practice, and so their main leader was like, wow, this really puts you in the void. So there's what's I would say we're what would be the right I don't want to call it metaphilosophical, but we're agnostic to the philosophy, right? So if somebody is
Yeah.
like a pure scientific materialism and say this is all a brain thing and your brain's constructing everything, fine. If you're on the other end of an idealist or some type of theological
Becoming
dualist or
one with it. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, wherever you second, because I almost think of that as a secondary reflective knowing. It's like a
Right,
philosophical,
right.
theological knowing. And what we're talking about, is a more direct, immediate knowing. And that becomes quite meaningful and powerful for an individual when they can find that. That's like actually it's the thought about what it's doing is a secondary thing. It's like
Yeah.
how it's transforming you is the primary thing.
Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and any of my recall of wonderful quasi-mystical events is I can ground them right back into sort of a naturalistic framework because
Mhm.
I'm an agnostic. I'm not supernatural in any way. But the bliss out that I had was like an
Mhm.
orgasm basically, except it was
Yeah.
all up in the head, and the
Yeah.
void is just, the system just shut down
Yeah.
in an interesting way. So yeah, I just to put a little icing on what you just said,
Yeah.
I don't ascribe anything to what I experienced. But yeah.
We had we did kind of with Zendo at one point. We did a e-meditation retreat. It was the first, as far as I know, in the world where we were using. At that time, it wasn't even called Zendo. At that time, we weren't even selling devices. We
Okay.
were still prototyping. But we were
Uh-huh.
having people do Zendo twice a day for 5 days, and the primary study was actually to look at if we were giving these people instruction, could they implement and do it, right? Because we wanted to know if we're going to put this out in the world, can people do this at home or is it going to be too
Right.
hard? And the short answer is they could. But what was also kind of cool is to see these people that had, they're pretty modest, that most of them would say, yeah, I've meditated like 10 or 15 years, an hour a day, but I'm a beginner, which most of us would not call that a beginner, at least some kind of intermediate or something.
Right,
Um,
right.
and 75% of people really wanted to use this device after, and it wasn't even for sale, because it helped them drop into much deeper states. For me personally, I had a really profound change. We were meditating that much, and I was just kind of in a flow state, a selfless flow state for a couple months just after
Wow,
that. Yeah.
wow, wow.
So there, the dosing matters. Like how many sessions. Right now, we recommend just one session a day, usually as needed. 2-3 times a week. Like I kind of take the angle of like meditate daily, and then add this augment with this as needed.
Okay.
And sometimes people may use daily. There are also people who use this and don't meditate. They just put it on and drink a cup of coffee and sit and just be. And
Oh,
so that's and
okay.
they can get that. I don't think they get some of the same drop in and deepening
Yeah,
effects, but they get
yeah.
some of the focus flow
Mm-hmm.
effects that they would otherwise get after. So that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So people
No,
do
that's
use it for productivity, kind of biohacking kind of mindset too.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine in my book. Yeah. In fact, there are purists, and it's like, dude, there are so many ways to meditate.
That's
You
right.
know, I mean,
Yeah.
when I was a chef for a long time, and I would have a really busy night doing chef stuff, I'd go back into the dish section with we called them dish dogs, which is really bad, but they were my people. So I'd get back there and I'd just do dishes with them, and because there would be huge stacks of, and I would just white plates, white plates, white plates, and I would go into this so
Correct.
quickly. I didn't, and you could tune everything out, and you just focus. Kind of sounds like
Yeah,
Karate Kid, but so yeah, you can meditate a lot of different ways.
for sure. And I've definitely, in that sense, I respect the purists, I respect the
Yeah,
traditions, and it's an and
yeah,
that we're doing something new. This is disruptive. Some of the purists don't like this type of technology. Some will
yeah,
complain and say, well, why would we short circuit a process that takes people decades to understand? And I would say, do you see a lot of suffering in the world? And is there something that could be beneficial if we could help people wake up to a deeper sense of who they are, that feels a deep sense of care and compassion for the world? Would that be useful as we start to implement that into our social systems, our medical, our political, our governance, our business systems? Would this not economic systems? Would this be useful, right? So
Yeah.
I almost look at it as, whatever little pieces I can contribute, or we can contribute. Let's do that. And to your point, some of these purists, like some of their founders, were actually the disruptors, right? I mean, they were
Yeah.
disruptive
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and all these traditions eventually get you to a place to just be present here now more awake, not just like orienting only from a psychological self. So,
Yeah, and to me, it's an argument of false dichotomy because it's like, yes, there are the wisdom ways, there are the orthodox ways, but as you just said, breaking orthodoxy. So two ways to transcend it's ritual and disruption in my little book, and
mm,
disruption is the path, is the way forward to new ritual, or it can give insight or frame break and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, absolutely, and that's not disrespecting the traditions
that's
because
right.
that they. I always look at it this way, that the human population is like a body, and there are people who can go to a monastery and spend their whole life meditating 9 hours a day or 10 hours a day. We need those people. We need them there. They are
Hmm.
the exemplars, or they are the archetype that we need to see, just like we need the archetype of the physician, we need the archetype of the teacher. So they have a very important role there, but not everyone in modernity has that means, that capacity, or the accessibility. And I think I agree with you that this kind of thing, this curiosity and the inquiry into how can we live a busy, hectic modern life, but carve out 20 minutes a day or an hour a day or whatever it is to
Hmm.
do something that would benefit us. And as you said, alleviate suffering. So there's my editorial.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like use Zendo and put a crack in the door, right? Get your foot in the
right,
door to like
right.
open up a lot of things, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, no. I think if anything, it's a good start. And if you do want to go
Mhm.
the monastery route and you want
Mhm.
to, cloister yourself, great, go do that if you can
Yeah.
do that, and come
And we
back and
do
tell
have
us.
monks, by the way, that do use these
Oh,
devices, right? So it's not
oh,
just
okay.
rough and
Are you?
tumblr,
Yeah,
have a cup of
people like
coffee
us.
and do Zendo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like
What
there are
is the
people.
feedback? What's the feedback from what I would say in long form, long duration
It's
meditators?
it's fascinating. I think more I see it more in the younger
Okay.
ones versus older folks, right?
Okay.
I would say that's one feature. But they too will kind of describe these similar processes of like just accelerating the drop, right?
Okay.
It's like
Okay.
just slowing down the identification with what I am not, right? I'm not this
Right.
body. I'm not these thoughts. I'm not these memories. I have them. They're accumulations, right? So that's the dissociation. If we're like, no, I have them. They are part of me, but they're not who I am.
Yes.
They're an accumulation that I have, and subsequently, these folks vary into like grounding in that deeper sense of being and who they are, and learning to reorient to their body, their
Hmm.
emotions. It's like if I'm in this open, free, peaceful, loving space, then how would I relate to my psychological self that had these wounds when I was younger? Well, I'd actually love
Mm.
it, right?
Yeah.
I'd learn to embrace it, right? What would I
Yeah.
do with this body? It was like, well, do I have the option to keep it tense and tight, or would I help it be loose and relaxed and supple? Would I exercise it? Would I move it, right? What would I do
Mhm.
with these emotions? Oh, emotions now become more of a monitor of valence of what's happening and what's working within me in relationship to other people and other situations. And instead of it being emotion I have to run away from, right? It's like
Yeah.
avoidance of pain and attraction to pleasure. It's like, whoa, there's something painful here. Let's actually look in a little more, right? Like this
Right.
is
Right.
this is teaching me something. And
Hmm.
so when people learn to kind of ground, and monks do this, we can do this, and then they learn to ground into this, it helps somebody have a radical reorientation to these features of their being, but also with other people, right? It's like
Yeah.
usually people were projecting onto people like what I need out of you so that it gives me something I perceive I need. What happens if I radically change that stance where like I'm at peace now? At best, there's something we can mutually create together. Some of my needs that I thought I had that I needed from you are less important. But
Mm.
now I'm actually available to show up and provide some mutual need together where we can create
Mm.
something amazing, right? So,
Yeah.
and how does that apply to work? I mean, you just take it through every domain of your life, right? but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
starts
for
here.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And part of what you said reminds me of a kind of a species of exposure therapy where you can witness the wounded child. You can witness that
Hmm.
chapter of you
Hmm.
that's still there in
Hmm.
in a layer of you. So yeah, that's really cool. And this also brings to mind, and this is also probably why it's a good idea for me to have your conversations with Greg down below.
Mm.
Is his idea of mind. And so we have
Mm.
mind one, mind two, at 3A and B, and then you all talk about mind four. So would you want to start into that, or do you want to do your slides first, and then we can go into Greg's scheme and really talk about what's going on in practice? What would you prefer? Do you want to do
So
slides, or
yeah, let's do.
or do you
I
want to do
think do
Greg stuff?
slides because it grounds it for the people that are think we're
Okay,
about to go woo woo, and then we'll go back to the mine one, two, three, and four, which
that would be
has some
great.
speculative components to it, but I
Yeah,
think also
yeah.
some pretty valuable things as well. So
Yeah. Oh, I love it as it to me it's a strong heuristic. I mean,
yeah,
show me something else,
that's
and
right.
I'll
That's right.
and I'll integrate it. Yeah. So,
Uh,
all right. And let's see. I believe you have permission to share. So there you go. Perfect. All right.
Yeah, let me see here. All right. Great. So this just a little bit of a slide deck in part for this talk, and that just genuinely we have this mission to help people more effortlessly experience deeper meditation, improve well-being. This is important. We need it in the world, right? We live in a time
Mm-hmm.
of profound abundance, not equally shared, but profound abundance that's about to get even more amazing, not equally shared. But
Mm-hmm.
that if we don't learn to take care of our within, inside out, like we're a hot mess express.
Mm-hmm.
So Zendo is a type of neurostimulation we're using to help people quiet their mind and calm their body. It's not a tracker. It's not an EEG headset reading the brain. It's writing, right? So it's stimulating different brain regions in the nervous system to help people get more focused and feel better, more relaxed. It's pretty simple to use. Basically, there's a Zendo headband I have here as well, but there in the image it shows how we basically put in the pads, turn on the device, set your mode. There's modes 1 through 4. Mode 1 is the least strong, mode 4 is the strongest. So you feel it more on the skin, but it also has more of the meditative effect. Put it on the head with the one puck over the left eye, one over the right temple. Press start, and you're good to go. And kind of for folks kind of interested in the science, so there are some brain regions called the medial prefrontal cortex, kind of over your eyes, on your forehead, essentially in the middle, and then this insula area that's you actually have them on both sides. But there's some literature done by a guy Mike Fox who looked at a variety of meditation traditions and had people meditate under those traditions, or a compilation of these studies, and said there's just like if I play a piano or play tennis or eat food, like my brain's going to operate differently. And so different meditations will induce different brain regional networks. But at the same token, there's some common areas. And so this medial prefrontal cortex and anterior insula. So that's where we went. We said, well, let's actually stimulate that. And so we have a cathode over this medial frontal pole and an anode. And so the cathode tends to be more inhibitory and decrease activity, and the anode tends to be more excitatory. So TDCS itself doesn't depolarize neurons, but it will change the propensity for those neurons to fire. So if you're actually meditating and your brain's already trying to do that, this device is giving it a nudge, right? It's just in
Mm-hmm.
the nudge you're already putting it. And based on dosing, you can see these images here, kind of very low dose to stronger dose. You can get more electrical field activity. For some folks, I'm not sure how they would perceive this, but this is to kind of show intensity or change of effect. To be clear, this is not, I want to be very clear, this is not like cooking somebody's brain or something like this where they see these red areas where there's more activity, but just that dosing matters. And so for some people, too low a dose will not have much effect. Too high a dose could make somebody feel like a little too spacey, is the way I've heard people describe it. They kind of feel too spaced out for a few hours sometimes. Okay, that's too strong a dose for your brain. right? And so
Hmm.
that's why there are these different dosing effects. And what's important, is are the effects and are there effects for people? And the answer is yes. And in blinded, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials, and the placebo is meditation, right? So that's
Mm.
an active control. We can see, changes in mind wandering. So this is on a Muse scoring scale. Generally, that's something that can take weeks or longer to kind of budge in mind wandering. So the idea of like your attention's on something and then you drift. Do you catch it and bring it back, right? And so how well either are you A, keeping focus, or B, noticing your mind has wandered and bring it back. And so we can have this, statistically and experientially difference in mind wandering with a single session, which is pretty profound compared to usually having to meditate an hour a day with MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. Speaking of stress, we've had, and this was in an open label study where we had people using Zendo and having a drop in their stress by 75% just after a 20-minute session. And then I have this third image over here where we're talking about people being more calm and 2.5 times more calm than using an active control meditation app to kind of calm their system. And so these are just in single session, so we haven't done, to be fair, we haven't done like great longitudinal studies of like, well, what happens if you kind of use this, every other or every 3 days for a month or a year or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
We just have case series. So I'm an individual now, been using it, I guess, since 2016.
Wow.
So I can kind of comment on those kind of things, but we don't have generalized systematic study of those
Hmm.
things. So, and just who uses it. So I mentioned a little bit about some of the monks. We have some folks in meditation studios, U.S. Olympic Performance Center. We had some folks in Taekwondo using this device. I just gave some devices to a local school where they're using it for their teachers to help them de-stress. And so we have directions to, there's the meditative contemplative feature, but there's also like just quality of life and generalized mental well-being. And right. So we're looking at maybe even some shifts of how people are using this for pain or sleep or focus or energy and productivity.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that I at least wanted to kind of walk you through some of that. Happy to reflect any thoughts or questions on that as well. So yeah.
No, I appreciate you doing that, running through the slides because again, I'll be transparent. I am advocating for what you're doing, and it is. We both said it. It's because there is a concern for the stress level collectively in Western modern society, and if anyone can step forward and say, "Here, try this," let's see what happens when we do this, and where will that take us? And so this is my impetus and my motivation for having this conversation with you, having tried the product, and hoping that I would see something, or I would we wouldn't be having this conversation if something I didn't garner something on my end. So that again, just this is all said to speak sincerely to the audience that this is not an
Mhm.
infomercial. This is not a run through a gimmicky plug or anything like that. So that you showed those slides, I appreciate that. And there was some more information on the Zendo site. You can learn from that. And again, the conversation that you had with Greg, especially towards the higher numbers, especially like from episode 9, I believe, up through 12. And then you have a separate episode where you and Greg are actually using the device itself.
Mhm.
And Greg is not a shill either. He's a professor of psychology. He's not going to sling bullshit
Mhm.
any more than anyone else who wants to maintain their credibility. So, yeah, again, and I'm probably overdoing this, but I just want to speak that this is all being done in good faith and in sincerity. And so anyway,
Yeah.
speaking of Greg, and actually to respond to any of the slides, I don't think I have a response other than are there plans for, like you said, a longer duration analysis or like a metadata package that can come out of aggregated
Yeah.
reviews and research, or is that in the works?
Yeah, so we're in a phase where we made a version one product that were like sticky pads on the head, and then they work great, but it was not as eco-friendly, and we got that feedback. We made more eco-friendly, so the pads that we have now are made out of tree pulp, so you could,
Okay.
in principle, throw them in your backyard. So we started selling this version 2 this year, and so we will probably, as we kind of finish selling out this version, that is the kind of re-up decision of where our trajectories we're going to go. Is this more longitudinal study? One direction we are interested in looking in, which may get into more of, we talk about the future of these kind of things, but at least a sneak peek of, could we look at integrating with other people to generate, and perhaps other companies to generate a sense and stem closed loop system, right? So not only, so our device will write or stem, but there are other devices and methods to read, so like using EEG or FNIRS. And then could you combine like an AI computational modeling for that individual, where basically the device is reading what you need, and it's giving you a much bigger, in that sense, nudge, or a more precise nudge when you need
Okay.
it. So that's a
Okay.
direction we're looking at.
Okay. And when you mentioned EEG, did you have a chance to look at that link I sent you with Judith Amoris Fernandez?
I did.
Did
It
you get?
was they used VR, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
did they use what was the other device they used on
I
that?
think it was a squib of some kind, some EEG, it started a feedback loop basically. There was some
Yes.
interaction. I don't understand the mechanism of action on it, but
Yeah.
yeah, if you I just found that really interesting. And
So there are some other devices, one in particular called Muse, where
oh
it's
yeah, yeah,
reading EEG and then it's giving you feedback. You may hear
right.
particular types of sounds when, and they kind of quiet and cessate as you're getting more in a focused alpha rhythm, and then they gets louder as you kind of drift or mind
Okay.
wander.
Okay.
And so I did like the idea of the VR is actually a very interesting critter in its own way. So there's the idea. I like the idea of like what you were describing, where they had like EEG monitoring for a particular brain state, and then they
Hmm.
could like levitate or have like they gamified it,
Psychokinesis.
right?
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
superpowers, pyrokinesis and stuff. What I
Yeah.
liked about it too was that it did, in a sense, cause an interaction in the world, right? So
Yeah.
instead of eyes closed, I'm interacting with the world, because in many ways, I think I would argue meditation is great to, it's like learn to root in your stillness. And
Hmm.
the easier way to do that is to be still.
Yeah.
But at some point, you want to get up off the cushion or the chair, and you want to talk to each other, and you want to talk to your kids, and you want to talk to your coworkers. And can you keep that state? And the answer is generally not, right?
Hmm.
Over time,
Hmm.
though, as you become more cognizant and compassionate and you're working with this, you can, right? And that's a
Hmm.
beautiful thing. And then you find your triggers. So the idea, could this VR play a role in helping people be more, in a sense, embodied with trying to maintain a certain brain state? That's pretty cool. The other side piece, I would say, I don't know how much you've ever played with VR, but it
Hmm.
has a parallel kind of, I don't want to sound woo woo, but it has a parallel to like lucid dreaming. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's these practices to kind of learn to be awake and not break the dream, but to be aware you're in a dream, and you're cognizing you're not, that you're dreaming, right? You have this dream
Right.
body and dream self, and then you wake up from that. And that the traditions would say there's a parallel to our waking state, and I would actually say
Hmm.
our modern neuroscience would also say that, and I could kind of explore that. But the VR piece is interesting, because if you ever put on a VR system, in different time periods, it takes somebody, but they could have this device on, and they really start to become immersed. In a sense, they
Yeah.
forget they're in VR, and then you
Yeah.
take the goggles off, right? And you're in another VR, right? With
Yeah.
goggles that you came wired with, right? You can't take
Right.
these off.
Nature's. Yeah. Yeah.
You can close them, but you can't take them off, right? You can't
Yeah.
take these
Yeah.
off. So that's another interesting parallel or playful insight into nature of our experience. Yeah.
Right. Right. And having found Judith's work years ago, it got me imagining that in being able to have that power of transportation into simulacra or yeah, simulacra, that one could induce elevated states, maybe not quite a full bliss out, but that this would have some therapeutic value in the sense that with capture of maybe four of your senses, three of your senses, and also suggestion from induction through a skilled voice, a trained
Hmm.
voice that can, calm you down, all these different things that are working, plus maybe inputs from something like you're doing that
Hmm.
one could induce, I don't know where it would go, but a state, this could have, to me, therapeutic value in breakthrough in terms of somebody who is really in a hard place and
Yeah.
maybe PTSD or
Hmm.
whatever level of depression that
Hmm.
that they are afforded that space of and again the visuals could be tied into the mythopoesis, the
Hmm.
angelic, or whatever your culture has for positively valent experience, transcendent experience, so blah 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 blah. So it just got my imagination racing. And if I had a budget, if I had money, I actually reached out to Judith and I'm like, do you collaborate? And I'm like, and I told her I didn't have any. I don't have any money. I could whip up 50 grand, but this is probably about a 200,000, 300,000. But anyway, just ideally, it would be great to
Yeah.
get really good minds together and have them collaborate with sound and visual and like the tech that you're using and the feedback from EEG response. So anyway, blah, blah, tangent,
No,
sorry.
but
But
it's
yeah,
gonna,
it's just
it's
like
not a,
the,
it's, I don't
people
think of
are,
it as a
people,
tangent. It's where it's
yeah,
going, right?
yeah,
And
people
it's
are
a
going to
matter of who
develop
does
that.
it. Yeah, and so I would argue, and I'm biased as a brain stimulation expert, that you need brain
Right.
stimulation
Yeah.
there to
Yeah.
nudge the brain. But to your point, you got all these other sensory inputs. You have like the linguistic feature that you can dial in for that individual, right? It could get at a
Yeah.
cultural and an individual level, as you're
Right.
describing,
Right.
and even have various sensory, mythological, or whatnot features that
Yeah.
really move someone, right? And that's going
Yeah.
to be super powerful, and the key will be that we use it wisely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Not just for capitalists.
right, right.
Money, money,
That
money. Here,
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's a whole other theme of like who, I don't want to over tangent, but who gets to control the AI? Is it going to be just
yeah,
large corporations? Is it going to be just countries?
yeah,
And neither of those may have your best interests. They may or may not, but you should have some concern. Or could there be some type of public commons, which is kind of
yeah,
over idealistic, but like, hey,
yeah.
everybody gets a certain amount of compute and a certain amount of, and you have an AI that's genuinely looking out for you in reference to yourself and the world.
Right.
I would love to see something like that, and people are talking and working on those ideas too. So,
Yeah. In fact, before we hit record, I'd mentioned that I'd interviewed Bernardo Kastrup. He's one of his PhDs was in configurable computing AI, and he just launched Euclid with some other partners, and it's
hmm,
supposed to be an ethical AI. I don't know,
awesome.
but those are the auspices. So yeah, yeah. Here's to that. Here's to because I like Bernardo. I think he's
Hmm.
got a good head on his shoulders. So if
Yeah.
he's at the helm, then maybe he can be an influence in this direction of not just being all the imaginary nefarious things that could come from what could go wrong with just one man controlling all AI. It's like all those dystopian nightmares. But anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's so. But before we get to Greg, let's speak to we're future forward thinking and Imagineering. Can you talk about what you guys are Imagineering, or do you want to hold off, or where does
Um,
Zendo or your
Yeah, I mean,
project? Oh,
in reference, I kind of gave at least a very broad stroke about that, but that
hmm.
direction we are looking as the sense stem AI
Okay, okay,
combination, right? So you could
okay.
imagine having a system that you could wear at particular times,
Hmm.
and that it would do, for example, maybe you're trying to go into a particular state or intention, and the device is reading your brainwave system. And if you're doing it, then great. It just goes right into it and you're good to go. If you're
Hmm.
not, then it might like stim your brain to like nudge you into that, right? And then it
Okay,
may pull
okay,
off the stem as you're in it. And then if you're kind of going back out of it, it might nudge it back on. And then the
Okay.
idea that you could use, when I mention AI, I'm meaning it two ways. One is it's helping you read and write. That would be the primary function. But
Right.
the other would
Okay.
be this kind of overlay. It depends on how, I mean, first pass, I think just even overlay with audio, right? Like, so a type of meditative practice. So you can imagine dialing in all the things that you like or dislike, things that trigger you or don't philosophically or
Hmm.
theologically or
It
naturalistically.
trains on you basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you get a good system that's like, and so you really accelerate the practice at another
Okay.
level in addition to STEM or in addition to sense, but like a closed loop feedback that AI is driving that also has the linguistic. But to your point, you could then put on, eyes and ears and haptic systems, and you could do all kinds of things, right? But that's a
Right.
little later, I would say. I think
Okay.
this first pass, sense and STEM closed loop, is where
Okay.
we would like to go.
Okay. Okay. That
So if we have
sounds
any
that.
investors out there interested, please contact me later.
Yeah. Get a hold of Baron. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, because
Yeah.
you heard my little pitch for Imagineering. I think
Mhm.
any of these kind of things that have, we are in an attention economy. We are in an economy
Yes.
of what I call the prophilic self, or the projected self into the domain, the ecosystem of social media and the interwebs and
Hmm.
all that. And so to reify oneself and to ground oneself in having that life, I think I say this to the on behalf of people under 30, that you and I are not digital natives. We grew up when the pocket calculator was the fastest thing on the
Yeah.
block, and now the kids right now are, they're just fully immersed in a simulacra environment. I've used that word twice now. Well,
Yeah.
but yeah, they are in that world. And so grounding oneself, I
It's
think.
it's actually a great point. We aren't the digital natives, right? I didn't grow up with a cell phone, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
which is fascinating. And the things that we're talking about and use of Zendo, this is about reclaiming your attention. It's
Hmm.
actually noticing where your attention is
Yeah.
and do you want it there? Because without the training, we just get pulled usually, and even in the science, it's like we get pulled from a bottom up perspective of whatever grabs our attention. And now people talk a lot about this, but now we have algorithms that understand our salience. And so they just grab,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so they grab young and old, but like if you're young, that's what you're growing into, right?
Yeah.
And so that actually arguably gets into this, why even an AI that's looking out for you is so important versus a system that just amplifies the attention economy where you've lost all control. You've totally become a digital slave. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think much like the rest of life, like if we're feeling happy and good about a direction, we're not going to change it. It's only when we're unhappy or suffering like hell that we're
Yeah.
now starting to cultivate the motivation to change. My gut or hope is that the same will happen with this digital slavery, that people will say, wow, I'm like gotten really addicted to my phone or watching TikTok or whatever it is for that person. And this balance of it doesn't mean don't look at TikTok. It means look at it a certain way, a certain amount of time, a
Right.
certain
Right.
type of quality. If you're being driven by things that just enrage you, is that really what's better for your well-being or for the planet,
Yeah.
right? So the more attuned, wise use of attention, right? And so, but you almost have to unplug from all that to like ground in where am I now? Where am I now? What am I now? What is happening now, right?
Yeah.
Don't interfere with it for a moment just to see what's happening, right?
Hmm.
Can I find the
Hmm.
stillness and peace here? You know, not non-interference, right? Just for a moment, right?
Hmm.
What is that like? Then can I reorient the rest of my body, mind, yeah, my system, my relationships, my work, my leisure activity with the digital? How do I reorient everything to from this? I think,
Yeah.
and so that's at least one of the things that both through meditation, Zendo, painful life experiences, aspirations for something greater have kind of all like left me to like kind of find that grounding space that everyone has. People have different philosophical and theological or naturalistic frameworks about it. That's secondary to me. What's primary is you understand what it is experientially, and it let it totally transform you in everything you do. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. And I think one of the bellwethers of what you're concerned about, what you just covered, is that, we're talking about loneliness epidemics and
Mm,
people having parasocial relationships that are not doing what has been happening for 100,000 years in small, communities. And I think what you're doing, if I could wave a magic wand and be on a crusade myself, I would try to help people who are digital natives, who are in the digital enslavement. And I'm a sort of serf of digital. I jump in and out, but it's like teaching eudaimonic
mm,
states versus hedonic states, because all
yes.
of that is driven by capture. I just interviewed Anna Lemke. She's a psychiatrist at Stanford.
Hmm.
She's the dopamine doctor,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
addiction.
Hmm.
She's done a lot of work on that. And so, I have a little project of my own, and it is to teach that old way of steady state,
Hmm.
non-oscillatory
Hmm.
existence, where your dopamine and your rage and your depression. And so that is, and what you're doing with the mindfulness and facilitating that,
Hmm.
I think helps to, because if I took anything away from my 10 or so years of aggressive meditating, was that everything is a verb. So being
Yeah.
is a verb, personing is a verb,
Hmm.
identity is, it's all in
Hmm.
process. It's
Hmm.
and I love Whitehead. It's all in
Hmm.
process, and that we can see it that way. And if we see it that way, that we don't reify a static identity, we don't reify a dogmatic attachment to X, Y, and Z, which can then enslave you and capture you, blah 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 blah. So if I were able to launch a crusade, it would be to help raise awareness of this distinction between a hedonic driven life and a eudaimonic or ataraxic, kind of
Hmm.
life.
Hmm. Oh, I love it.
And
No,
what,
I
yeah,
love it.
what you're doing is in my opinion, is facilitating an awareness of eudaimonia or steady state well-being versus
That's right.
boop, 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 boop. Yeah. So
That's right. Right. Find the stillness of the within the boop 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 where it does kind of level out,
yeah.
and that there's less attachment if it boop boop boops even a little
Right,
bit.
right. Yeah, because you could
Yes.
still ride the dopamine. I mean,
Yeah.
I am bored. I was a hedonist for a long time, and so
Yeah.
I love, chocolate ice cream and coffee is about as far as fast as I fly now, and occasional road trips to botanical gardens where I can just be with my plants. But
Yeah.
it's those are treats. That's not.
That's right.
I don't have to do it every day, or I'll be, in the corner in a fetal ball
That's
crying
right.
because my life is a shithole. So
That's right.
anyway. Well, let's talk about Greg's work and
Sure.
your overlap with that work or convergence with that work, and then we're right at about an hour. So I think that would be a great way to cap it off, is to
Sure.
understand what Zendo is doing when we are in minds 1 through 4, and the column MO, and we'll hit the audience with a couple of terms. And if you want, I can share a quick infographic of Greg's mind 1 through 3, if that helps, or we can describe it either way, if you want to.
Um. Yeah.
It's
Whatever
up
you
to you.
feel. I mean.
Let me
Yeah.
see. I know I have a lot of tabs open. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Okay. Oh, no, no, no.
And while you're pulling it up, I'll just say to the audience, it's for folks familiar. Greg Henriquez has kind of founder of like Unified Theory of Knowledge, and
Uh-huh.
Greg's a good friend. And in many ways, it's kind of a return to a metapsychological framework. And in my world of psychiatry, we got rid of meta narratives and metapsychology, and so everything was symptoms and syndromes, but it doesn't give any explanatory meaning. And we haven't gotten as good to like narrow everything down to the brain. And
Hmm.
arguably, this model would point out we probably will never will. We'll continue to get better and better and better and better. But
Okay.
and so to kind of reconceptualize the mind as an emergent plane of complexification. So out of energy information, kind of talking about a naturalistic metaphysics, to then
Hmm.
talk about where the mind fits in there. It's like there's matter, life, mind, culture, person, right? And arguably there might
Yeah.
be something emerging beyond that. And so
Uh-huh.
mind is not just an artifact of the brain. The mind is
Hmm.
not an unreal thing or process, but it's actually a very natural process that emerges. In particular, use the language of mind. It's a natural process that emerges at a higher order information processing out of complex nervous systems that are in organisms, right? There's even a distinction between mind and consciousness that perhaps, if substrate independence is possible, you could have consciousness without a brain. But when we're talking about mind, at least in the UTOC framework, we're talking about something that comes out of living organisms, and then we're a subtype of those. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And going back to verbing everything, that's how I get rid of consciousness controversy is I just verb the consciousness, claim and it's cheap and easy, but it's like it just helps me because I don't want to have an ontic status for consciousness. I want it to be,
Yes.
as you said, it's an aggregation of complexity through living systems from a single cell on the way up to where we find ourselves being metacognitive creatures. All right, I found a Google image page so we can toggle around in there. Can you see that? Is that okay? Are you getting the
Now I
image?
see it. Yeah. Now I see
Okay.
it.
All right. So we can go to his broad, overarching rather, where we start into, as you said, matter, life, mind, culture, and then science sits on top of the social science of culture. But let me go back to the map of mind and that. Is that something you can see there? Here's
Yeah.
another one. That might be a little clearer.
Yeah.
No.
You may want to, if you can
Oh, here, this
enlarge
one's
it
good.
maybe or something. Yeah.
Yeah, let me see. It's probably going to take
We,
me to medium.
yeah. So we could just kind of talk about it and use that framework.
Okay.
So, just in a description, if you guys can see, there's a mind 1, 2, and 3, and then there's an A, B component to it. And mind 1 is basically information. I think that even says it on the slide, information instantiated and processed within and by the nervous system. So I've said with Greg before, in one way, part of my day job is a mind 1 specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not taking people's neurons out, I'm not cutting tissue out, but I am changing the way the brain is processing information, the way the brain is communicating to other nodes in a network, that people can develop circuitopathies where basically circuits are behaving in an abnormal way and it causes a lot of symptoms. And it's
Mm-hmm.
very fascinating that some people could maybe call BS on that, but it's like fascinating to be doing this for, 20 years and see how you can convert somebody out of these various kind of behavioral states that they're stuck in, such as major depression,
Mm-hmm.
by using things like TMS or transcranial magnetic stimulation. So, and the epistemology of that is still observable, right? I can use an EEG to look at brainwave activity. I can use a functional MRI to look at regional blood flow to get a proxy of functional activity of the brain, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in his case, he talked about the mind 1B, and that would be the observed behavior of that organism that's mentated,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
knock a cat out of a tree on a tree limb that's alive and minded, it'll land on its feet. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
mind 1B behavior. This is different than mind 2, which would be essentially a certain type of mind 1 allows for this mind 2 phenomenological state or process, as we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned process. And so that has a different epistemology, right? So it's like, what am I thinking, feeling, perceiving now? Current state, you don't know, right? Or vice versa, right? If I'm trying to imagine what yours is, I don't know. And so that's a unique idiographic first person epistemic of how to know oneself. And so I think why do we bring that up? It's important because in a naturalistic science, in naturalism, and whether you talk about scientific materialism or just science in general, is really trying to extract out a mind too. It's like we want to
Mm-hmm.
not include your subjective agent arena experience, right? That's not
Mm-hmm.
what we want to talk about. But in terms of being human and to have more complete models and more complete models of our minds and psyches, it's kind of silly to not talk about that domain of having kind of experience, the qualia, redness, or the sense of an experiential self. But it's
Mm-hmm.
uniquely private. Now that may change as we get better at mind 1, and we can always come back to that. But
Mm-hmm.
there is a form of this experiential self that can be known, and that's at this mind 3 level. And there's a
Okay.
private and a public version, and that comes
Hmm.
through our justifications, right? Our kind of belief systems that are encoded in our brains, in our minds, in our systems. And there's a private version of what I don't say to you. And then there's the public version that I do say to you, right?
Right,
And that
right.
public version, that mind 3B, that public justification is how you now get to know part of my mind, and including my mind too. If I tell you, hey, I feel sad, or hey, I feel happy, I'm now publicly sharing a version. And because you in your own mind too know what it feels like to be happy or sad, or some version of that, when I say I'm happy or sad, you can kind of empathize with me, right? And so
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
superpower of using justifications, again, and in the psychological realm, there's the ego that's kind of private, and the persona that's more public, right? And so
Hmm.
in the journey of health, you want to develop a healthier mind 1, right? Otherwise, you
Hmm.
will have various types of illness. Um, Being open and owning your mind 2, and your mind 3, developing a healthier ego and a more authentic persona. Now, where I would say we talk about mind 4, right, is then kind of a speculative, right? So that, Greg
Okay.
wouldn't, I would argue, would not put this in his general. It's more of a speculation, if you will, on top of
Right.
that theoretical model. But it's essentially the way I would frame a mind 4. It's like the schematic feature of mind. It's like now
Oh, okay.
starting to look at the structures of mind, and to know them, know the embeddedness that we've been immersed in it, and we can learn to pacify these structures, right? So, for
Hmm.
example, and so I talk about 4 types, and it's not an exhaustive list, but I talk about meta awareness, meta attention, metacognition, and meta systemic approaches, right? And
Hmm.
so working backwards. So metasystemic would be, I actually you and I pay attention to what's happening on the planet. We care about the personal and the planetary, and how systems interact. And anybody interested in UTalk or system views or integrative worldviews, they're already, by the very nature of that, I would argue, they're already metasystemic to some degree, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
People, I politically, I consider myself a radical moderate. I'm not. There's a value
Right.
in conservative and liberal principles throughout nature.
Right.
It's not unique to humans, and to preserve what persists and works, but also
Hmm.
advance and evolve into something new is you need that. Um,
Hmm.
the metacognitive would be fitting a little more of like applying that lens not out on the world and other people or systems of systems like nature and how it all interacts. We need those,
Hmm.
but it's now
Hmm.
applying it back on the self, the psychological self, right? And being able to look at these layers of an experiential self, an ego persona, commonly in useful psychotherapy. Even something like cognitive behavioral therapy, you're learning to cognize about your cognition. You're learning to look at
Hmm.
your thought and say, I have this thought, but it doesn't make it immediately accurate. It just means I
Hmm.
have this thought. And if it's inaccurate, I can learn to change it. And so that would be more of a cognitive therapy. But even a kind of metacognitive approach would be just like noticing I have thought, but I'm not the thought, or I don't have to believe all these thoughts, right? There's
Right. Right.
learning a different relationship to the cognition. Same with
Hmm.
emotion, same with perception, right? And so that gets into the meta attention in a way, which
Hmm.
historically has been part of contemplative traditions. We're learning to train attention, right? So one exemplar of this, which I'm not saying people should rush to go do, but it's shamatha practice, where somebody says they've achieved shamatha and they can keep their attention on one thing for 4 hours without wavering. That's a pretty heroic goal to aim
Wow.
for, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to do that, but imagine, that we can look at our phone, we could look at something longer than 10 seconds. Right? That'd be in the digital natives. That's
Hmm.
not to be, judgmental about it. That it might be a big step if people can only look at something that lasts for 10 to 15 seconds. What if you could put your attention on something for a minute or 10 minutes?
Hmm.
And how that changes the quality of your experience. And then the contemplative traditions, they go further with it, right? It's like, let's actually really pay attention to where attention is at. Let's pay attention to thought, feeling, and perception, and notice its flow. And actually, as we notice the flow, you can then even start to deconstruct. So a lot of times, certain painful experiences are because we're at this higher order fixed structure of how this reification of how things have to be. But if you start to untangle it and say, well, if I'm looking at the world, what do I actually see? Well, there's color or there's sound and various types of things. You start breaking things down into smaller components, and they develop a different quality. So there's a guy, Shinzen Young, he would talk about cultivating attention and then sensory clarity, where you can start to differentiate your experiences, your mind to first person experiences. And then that can develop an equanimity because you're not necessarily so lost in like the hyperconstruction and the reification. And then the last layer, I would talk about that meta awareness, where that's where instead of just looking at attention on the contents of consciousness, it's just literally attention looking back at itself, or awareness looking back at itself. And it arguably is like the simplest thing we could ever do. And that paradoxically makes it very hard, because it's like there's nothing to actually do. You're already aware, right? Am I aware? Am I aware? Yes, you are. But those practices then, they're usually practices involving self-inquiry of like who I am and what I'm not. Spatial practices, because we usually feel localized behind our eyes, but there's no science that says you're behind your eyes. It's just a phenomenal experience you have, right? And a sense of time, right? So time, kind of playing with it a little bit, right? We psychologically know time through memory and imagination. So if you can start to deconstruct that, and you see you're in the now, in the present moment, and your sense of the past and the future are contents of your consciousness, right? And so you can do these different practices and reorient who you are and what you are, right? And so what I was talking about in the Mind 4 is, to me at least, in the part of that talk, was this like cognizing something that was happening that I've seen happen in other people and seeing happen in me, and trying to then meta framework, like how does that like fit? What the heck's going on? And so the you know, and I think maybe I'm slow and stubborn but interested in these things and stuff I've worked on for 30 plus years. Perhaps AI will help us accelerate these kind of things, right? As you find more natural ways to connect to that individual. That's why we need AI to look out for us, right? So it's not somebody else is trying to govern us. But anyway, I know I just said a ton of stuff there about Mind 1, 2, 3, 4, and if people are not familiar, we went way over, and I apologize. But for folks familiar, hopefully that was useful. So.
Yeah. And again, there's going to be links for. I think he has it on a playlist that might make it easier for me. But I'll at least link episode 1 of the two of you in dialogue all the way through 12. And I did that this week. I of course, like you admitted, I listen at like 2 speed or 1.75 speed, and as long as I don't distract myself, I can, because you guys both have mid-Atlantic accents like me, and I can just zoom in and just like and I've probably listened already one other time, so that'll be there for their consumption if they choose and if they're motivated. And when you were speaking of Mind 4, I went off on this mid-20th century philosophical tangent in my mind, and it was like, it reminds me, and I think it was Deleuze and Guattari were talking about, from machinic assemblage there is this abstracted diagrammatic virtual machinic assemblage, which would be like a metaphor of a blueprint that corresponds or correlates to, and they were very broad in their machinic. It's everything is machinic assemblage. A mother giving birth to a child is a machinic process in a sense, not to objectify that process, but that's relations. It's all relations. But that abstracted diagrammatic, which it's a schematic. It's just like a blueprint of that which is occurring. Phenomenologically in this case, or phenomenologically, just made me think of that. I had to throw Deleuze and Guattari in there.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's also their concept of territorial, the triadic territorialize, deterritorialize. It's a circular process, and that's what we're doing in meditation. Sometimes is we deterritorialize ourselves and then re-enter, and we are a new territorialized system. It very subtly, and it occurs over time. So that's the one thing that my little mind came up with when I was listening to you is that if there are Deleuzian and Guattari and what was the other guy, Simondon, perhaps that might have been his take. I don't know. I get that stuff all jumbled up sometimes. So a question I have out of that is in mind 1 through 4, when we are going from our sort of, I guess, this beta wave state into a meditation down into different wave states, or different from a phenomenological perspective, going from executive ego, full interaction with reality, back into a drop in to a kind of no self. Are we going from sort of mind 3A to almost, to me, it's like a split into 2 and perhaps a little 4, or is it just strictly going down into 2 where there is this, you do justice to that, but where do we go? I would assume we start at 3, perhaps A, the non-public self-reflective self, and where do we go when we go into those different states of meditation? If we could use Greg's diagram.
Yeah, so I, first pass as a speculative. Think of this as a map trying to describe a territory that's undivided, right?
Right.
Reality is undivided but distinct, right? There's distinction and there's boundaries, but it's undivided. So with that as a first pass, I would almost think of, a lot of meditative practices are usually involving some type of meta attention and meta cognitive process.
Okay.
And then when they talk about those are more of what some people would frame as a progressive path, right? There are things you're working on. You could work on attention. You could work on mindfulness. You could work on relationship to emotions, these kind of things. But then there's the direct path, which is really just like pointing back to awareness. And to me, that's more of you tapping into the meta awareness. And in the frame of mind, it's kind of interesting. This then depends on your metaphysics. If we used an Indo-natural metaphysics, so maybe going over people, but just since we're going there, that sense of awareness in an Indo-naturalistic framework would mean you're at the base of mind 2, right? Okay. You're at the VR, essentially the VR system that your system is generating, a self-world model.
The mediated.
And you deconstruct it all the way down where you're just, there's no distinction, and there can be the formless, kind of what I call formless awareness, and people talk about formless awareness of it. And then there's the witness awareness where there's this formlessness and the content of the world and the self. And then the non-dual awareness where you realize that those aren't two. They're distinct, but they're not undivided, right?
Okay.
And so those would arguably be, as in a matter of experience, be part of mind 2. And then as people really start to experientially understand that, then they start to transform and perhaps change their ego and persona. And in most useful ways, they realize that they don't no longer have to reify their psychological self. And they could actually start working on wounds and start working on things in the most healthy way. It doesn't mean that the psychological self went away. I think it would be really clear. I don't think the goal, it's like saying, I'm trying to get rid of my hand. No, I'm not trying to get rid of my hand. I want to learn, A, that I'm not my hand, but our psychological self, we're like glued to it. So we're having to learn, like, I'm not my psychological self. I have it. It's a structure and accumulation of nature that runs within me for psychosocial purposes. Okay. Yeah. And if I let it drive, just like there can be digital slavery, there can be egoic slavery, right?
Yeah.
And most of us are enslaved by our ego. But we can learn to A, have some distance from it, and then B, let's learn to help transform it, right, in a healthy way. The shadow side of that is the spiritual ego. Well, now I'm so peaceful and I'm so loving, and everybody loves me and everybody knows I'm so enlightened. Can't you tell? I'm so enlightened. But if you go ask my wife, she'll tell you a different story, right? So it's like, so the healthier version of that is to be vulnerable, playful, humble about it. Because if you're not humble about it, life will make sure you are eventually. So that's okay.
It'll bite you in the ass.
Yeah. So that's the kind of it's like a reformatting, almost the way I think
Hmm.
about Mind 4 is a
Okay.
bottom or top down, where you're reformatting Mind 3 and Mind 2.
Uh-huh. Okay.
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 Now let's just, since you brought up Bernardo Kastrop, let's talk about
Hmm.
almost an exonatural metaphysics,
Uh-huh.
where in the model, in the endonatural, mind and consciousness is an emergent process that comes out of
Hmm.
layers of some
Hmm.
type of complexification.
Right.
But in certain types of post-materialistic or exonatural frameworks, which we could
Right.
include traditional religions, or we could talk about more modern versions like Bernardo's work
Like
with
idealism, yeah.
his analytical idealism. He'd say from
Hmm.
the very bottom, right? It's some type of consciousness or mind at
Right.
large. And for me, I tend to be one of those critters that holds both,
Yeah.
meaning my day to day. You push me to it, I'm just going to talk about the into natural, but
Yeah.
also having had enough interesting experiences and hearing enough about mind, I am
Hmm.
totally open that I do not think that's the end of the story. I think the Indo natural is like a could be a comfortable a ground we
Yeah.
can agree upon, but
Right.
there and the exo natural, they're going to be some people like no way Jose, and other people
Yeah.
they understand and they're like, oh, there's more to it. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and I'm like you. I think I split things and I used the word agnostic earlier, and I think there's really at this point of our cerebral development, maybe if we get another cortex and we can have others access to other things that we don't see or feel right now, maybe we can argue about it more. But I think at this point, agnosticism is a good tool
Mm-hmm.
to say that it is unknowable it is insoluble.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I love Bernardo's work, but I'm not 100% on board with a purely
Mm-hmm.
mind only. I think it's close. I think that, coalescence and self-organizing, and systemically, as Greg's chart shows, that you go from singularity, if there is,
Mm-hmm.
whatever singularity is, through to where we are and probably beyond in other living systems, that there is something going on there that is beyond the description of the stale and dry physical reductionist model, and so
Mm-hmm.
so I certainly grant that to Bernardo, and I think he's fighting a good fight. But like you, I think it is something that is obfuscated from us at the moment, that we
Mm-hmm.
we can say mind or consciousness. Like I can't get on board with it's a consciousness only, because consciousness is that which is used by a living system to
Mm-hmm.
palpate its environment and to have access to the environment. And at scale, the universe doesn't necessarily, it would have to be a regressive kind of, I don't know what means it would serve a universal
Yeah.
system or beyond a universal system to be conscious, but that consciousness is part of that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also not just a physical blob either, because we can't even agree on what physical is.
Right.
we
Correct.
could go into
What is
forever. Right,
matter, right?
right, right.
You
That's
can
where I'm
actually
with
know
Bernardo.
yourself better than you
Yeah.
can know matter in a way. So,
Right. And
um,
it's all useful language that we use, as he calls it, convenient fictions. And I think it's
mm-hmm.
absolutely necessary to do chemistry and physics and all these other
Mm-hmm.
things, and to crack things open and to move forward. But we
Mm-hmm.
have to be a little more, I think, and Mike Levin's doing that right now. He's got his
Mm-hmm.
Platonic
Great stuff.
forms and his geometry and stuff like that. I think that's a good, a nudge forward
Mm-hmm.
into solving a greater ontological mystery. But nonetheless, we can keep ourselves grounded in what we
Yeah.
have access to, which is, to me, is the meat of the matter. It's really important.
So I talk about maps. I've been playing with this idea of maps of knowing, very
Okay.
incomplete model, but I
Hmm.
talk about transcendent, subjective, objective, reflective, and expressive knowing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
expressive
Yeah.
knowing is art, reflective knowing is some of what we're just doing now. It's more of a
Hmm.
philosophical frameworks.
Hmm.
Um, Objective knowing we could own is commonly a domain of scientific discovery. In its most rich way, it's coming from the perspective of I don't know. And I'm going to
Yeah.
make models and try to falsify them. And if I
Test
can't
them.
falsify them, then I can predict and control until I come up with new data that will break that model and come up with a better model.
Right.
Subjective knowing is something that we live from. It's not something to get rid of, but we can unfortunately be imprisoned by it,
Yeah.
particularly when it gets too grippy and too small, when our self has
Hmm.
gotten too small. And this transcendent knowing is, in a sense, kind of talking about this meta awareness, or
Right.
it's actually so important that it's not about the words, like the transcendent knowing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not about the philosophy. It's not about the religion to it. It's not about the naturalism. It's about, in a very deep way, understanding that the depth of who you are is a profound mystery that is absolutely unified with all of existence.
Yeah.
And when you can know this in the marrow of your bones, you've totally transformed. You can forget, and you will forget, and that's okay. But to know that you are totally undivided within yourself, between each other and the world, now gives an orientation to reorient the whole set: your body,
Hmm.
mind, your psychological system, your emotions, your work, your production, your play, your whole thing.
Yeah.
So I play with that, where we could have the transcendent knowing and not necessarily understand the reflective knowing. We're like, is it endo? Is it exo? I don't know. It's fun play, but don't get locked on that that's the
Yeah.
most important thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Work with what we have access to,
Yes, and it's pretty
and
profound what we can find with inner
oh
self.
my God, yeah, we could do a lot with what we have available to us. And I
That's right.
love that description of the transcendent, because I think one of our modal confusions in modern West, not to be too critical, but since the Enlightenment
Hmm.
bifurcation, that we put a lot of chips in that cache of there is a heavenly reward waiting for you if you could just suffer through the existential mire of being, and that
Mm.
you will transcend to something better if you live a good life, and that's cool, but it's escapism, and it's not really addressing. And I think that's the seed of our suffering sometimes, is to say, you know that's a good metaphor for some things. Maybe it has some utility,
Hmm.
but maybe we need to rethink that. And I like that description you gave of the transcendent mystery. And it's like, you know invest that angsty worry energy into something else, and it's, again, it's mindfulness. It's not to
Hmm.
say that the East has all the answers, that the West is wrong. It's just that there's a synthesis project there. There's a tapestry to be woven,
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like,
from these
why
ideas.
wait? Why wait? Why are
Right,
you
right,
waiting to
right.
heaven if there is one or isn't?
Yeah,
It's probably
yeah,
because that's related to the ego. If we were being
right. Wanting to
passive,
persist.
yeah, wanting to persist, wanting to feel like
Yeah,
it's going to be okay,
yeah.
wanting certainty. These are mechanisms that are just built in us, or
Hmm.
evolved into us, and to say that's okay, and those things are there, and maybe there's heaven and maybe there's not. But like, why
Yeah,
wait? Like you can have there. People have been exploring transcendent knowing for a long time. That's nothing
yeah,
new.
yeah.
I tried to develop a device to get people into more meta attention and meta awareness, right? But at minimum,
Right.
if I can just help them like not be so grippy in their mind and get their body to relax and engage the world and have more productivity with a more lightness of being, then I feel like I've made a small dent, a little bend in reality,
Yeah,
in some useful way.
yeah.
So,
Because in doing that, it takes you a little bit further away from the angst of wanting to have some kind of thing happen after your body passes away that will make all of this make sense for you. I think if you can make things make sense when embodied and when engaged in life, and then because again, that model worked for, that type of social engineering worked for
mhm,
centuries. It's like you
mhm.
you were a person of faith. You went and went through the ritual, and you could get through life that way. But modernity kind of shattered all of that, and now it's
That's right.
like that's part of John's meaning crisis, Vervaeke's
Yeah.
meaning crisis. It's like we lost, and it's not to say that I value religion highly when it's used
Hmm.
right and it's outside
So,
of pathology. Yeah, it has a function and a structural, functional, organizational future with us, but that one can see the here and now, and know that the meaning and the purpose and the sense and all of that is synthesized in a
yeah.
healthy way, by other means.
So,
And,
so
and that's
to,
very editorial, and I apologize if anybody gets worried about it, but that's just one way to look
but
at it.
we live in an interesting time where you can have some sense of transcendent knowing, to know
Hmm.
in a deepest sense, in a way that's beyond any kind of logic, like that things are in a weird ass way radically okay,
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
okay, and like whether you're in a weird way, whether you're suffering or not is okay. But on a
yeah,
relative sense, you want to make it better, right?
yeah.
And in that evolutionary journey, right? I was talking about this with some of my residents and medical students a few days ago. It's just like to actually think, if there was this big bang, it's banging right now. We are
Yeah,
it banging,
yeah, yeah.
and that in the furnaces of ancient stars, we made heavier atoms and atoms that our body is made of, and
Hmm.
this living form and your living form were both a piece of life, and that this
Yeah,
piece of life is living from the original life on this planet. It's still in
yeah,
continuity with that. And then the system has then generated a, self-world modeling that helped create emerge a new kind of world within a world, right? And
Yeah.
then we're a special species of that, where we almost have a type of we have these justification systems running in us that a Mind 4
Hmm.
can see. It's almost like recognizing you have an LLM running in your system.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and we live in a time where we've now learned to take that symbiotic intelligence that's running in us and instantiate it in a machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Holy moly. What an
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing time to be alive. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so disruptive. There's tons of suffering everywhere. And it's also so amazing, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have a missed opportunity from modernity to use this reflective knowing to give people better creation stories, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I would argue this is so meaningful. Like we're on the bleeding edge of something we don't understand and it's about to
Hmm.
change.
Yeah.
This is so wildly amazing, right? And how can
Yeah.
we recognize and the way I just described that, right? Then that makes this sense of self, a type of transpersonal self, not in a woo-woo way, a very
Right. Right.
naturalistic way, that you and I are infinitely interconnected with everything and everyone.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
we now care? If we can really know that in the marrow of our bones, would we now then care
Hmm.
about something? Maybe we're really selfish. We care about everything, right?
Yeah, yeah,
In
yeah.
every
Not
way.
just your egoic
Correct.
salvation. Yeah, yeah,
That's right.
absolutely. No, I love that. That's a wonderful way. In fact, that might be a good way to bring the plane in for a landing on this conversation
Sure.
because yeah, it's and as you said, the burgeoning machine learning and Levin talks about this with diverse intelligences. Like we are a layer of intelligencing and
Hmm.
we have abstracted it, as you said, abstracted it out of ourselves and put it into a silicon based. And he's even talking about hybrids where it's a silico carbo synthesis project, and I'm really excited about that because I don't put a lot of stock in some of the mm, mystical aspects of what LLMs and so-called artificial intelligence is going to do. I don't go that
Hmm.
far, but it's
Hmm.
a tool. It's a
Hmm.
means to see where we can find ourselves in a decade. And if it's not pathologized and not manipulated for sociopathic ends, that
Hmm.
it'll be fascinating. It'll be a good time to be a witness to it. And I plan to be there, hopefully.
Yeah, same. I hope so. Hope you
Uh,
are. Hope I am. Yes.
yeah, I think so. I think so. Baron, did you have anything you wanted to wrap it up with? Any
Um.
concluding thoughts, summative thought? This is something else for Vaki does, and I like it. It's like having the guest just add one last thing to the
Sure.
conversation.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you having me on for this podcast. Appreciative this will get out to some people. Hopefully, they will find of it interest. Hopefully, um, a side effect. Maybe using Zendo for 10 years might make you kind of talk like this. So be careful, right?
I know, subversive plot. The minds
uh,
of Athens, the young.
yeah. But it's a beautiful thing, and people can use. It's a tool. This is a tool, and it can be
Yeah.
used from a very, very minor movement to just like I'm more relaxed and focused and flow, and that's a great value to going into the deep end of the pool. Right? It's kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
wherever you want to go. What choose your own adventure on that. Um, and I also did want to make sure to kind of give a special offer to your
Hmm.
audience. By the time this is filming, we'll have a promo code that we'll list as IdeaCast50. So
Okay.
IdeaCast 50 for 50% off of our
Okay.
device. So
All right.
we're just trying to get this out in the world and to be really candid, like I don't even get paid for any of that work. I've never even taken a paycheck, nor has my co-founder. I mean, this is really a project of passion
Okay.
at this point. So it's just to put it in perspective. If people think we're stuffing lots of money in our wallet, we're not.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
keeping it. We're persisting and able to kind of keep things moving. So
Okay.
we appreciate anybody's interest in for, you know allowing the future of this to continue and also the personal gains they may receive. So just wanted to say
Okay.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and thank you for being my guest, and thank you for the discount code on the product. And I'm going to say something in the intro in the beginning that they need to stick towards the latter part of this I won't say the very end, but the latter part of the conversation to get a discount code. So I'll say something up front in the intro that they may just skip through and get to it,
Hmm.
but hopefully it'll be a means to get
A
them
little carrot.
to listen. Yeah, to listen to, and I think it's a worthy. I'm already reflecting on the conversation sort of in some part of my head, and it's like this was a good conversation, and I appreciate you as a guest and what you're doing. You're always welcome to come back. So maybe, next year, early next year, or
Sure.
into the summer, we can talk about maybe some other ideas, or if you have
Hmm.
something coming up
Hmm.
that needs to be announced, let me know, and I'll be happy to bring you on. But yeah, I'd love to have you back as a guest again. And the only other thing that, and I know we've been about a little over an hour and a half, is are there? This is on your website, but there are communities coalescing around this in sort of forums, or there's like chat or support, or are there groups starting to emerge that I know you've sold about 1,600 units, so are you
Hmm.
seeing anything where people are communicating support,
Yeah,
basically?
so great question. I think current state there may be some Reddit
Okay.
profiles there.
Okay.
There's nothing we have currently on our website or anything.
All right.
It would be of interest, and that is part of the challenge and opportunity of like how do you further build community
Mm-hmm.
in these instances. And so thus far, I'm kind of more of like focused on the product, but there is
Yeah.
the expansion of the product. Would that be some of these more, you got to get the right kind of folks for the interest in this, but certain type of philosophical and practice frameworks that people would
Mm-hmm.
prefer. And so
Yeah.
I would say it's a work in progress for sure.
Yeah. No, I see it emerging because I mean, just looking at YouTube, there's live cat streams of rescue shelters and things, and there's huge communities that emerge out of that, on
Hmm.
Facebook or some
Hmm.
other platform. And so if cat videos can do it, then I know Zendo will do
Right.
it.
Yeah.
This is a for instance. So anyway, but Baron, this has been a very good generative conversation. I appreciate it. I'm glad we could speak to Zendo and
Yeah.
also
Thank you.
speak more broadly about things that I know my subscribers would be very much interested in. So I appreciate our being able to put this conversation together.
My pleasure. Yeah. Happy to hop on anytime. Yeah.
All right. That sounds promising for the future.
Yeah.
What I'll do, I'll say goodbye to you after I stop record. But to the YouTube audience, thank you so much for your time and attention. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. And I very much appreciate you being here for this one.
Thank you.